Hello and welcome to the Glasshouse webcast. Today's topic, VDI, Are You Ready?, will be presented by Andy Paul, the Glasshouse Principal Consultant. Andy is an accomplished virtualization architect, instructor, and speaker. He has designed and delivered virtualization projects for Fortune 500 companies, public and private healthcare organizations, and higher education institutions. He has also served as a lead technical trainer, adjunct professor, and guest speaker for multiple organizations. Currently, he leads Glasshouse's Citrix consulting team. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Paul.
Thank you, Natalia. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, VDI, Are You Ready? According to Gartner research, VDI is still in the early phases and offers high growth potential. Whether you are a systems integrator, reseller, consultant, in-house architect, or an IT decision maker, you need to understand the potential benefits and growth of VDI. You also need to understand what it takes to be ready for VDI implementations, which is what we're discussing this morning. The first step is identifying exactly what VDI means to your organization. VDI actually encompasses several types of delivery, but it is most commonly associated with what Gartner classifies as hosted virtual desktops, also known as HVD. VDI can also include implementations of server-based computing, of hosted shared desktops, and client-side virtualization. So there's several different meanings of what VDI really is. For the sake of simplicity, we will focus on hosted virtual desktop model for VDI, since that is the most common assumption within a VDI deployment. So as a virtualization architect, I've been involved in numerous VDI implementations, ranging from proof of concept to full life cycles. In the process of design and implementation, one thing is clear. Many companies are not ready for VDI. Some simply do not need VDI, but they think they want it. Others may need it, but have a long road to get ready for it. So the question becomes, how to determine if VDI is right for you? Where does your company fall in its readiness state? And then, of course, progressing into the decision-making process of how to get ready and when you are ready. So how do you know? Let's just understand that VDI does not need to be limited to delivering a desktop operating system, such as Windows 7 or Windows XP. And it does not necessarily need to come directly from a VDI management suite, such as Citrix XenDesktop or VMware View. VDI can also include hosted shared desktops based on Windows Server 2003 or 2008. They can be published desktops delivered via Microsoft RDS or Citrix XenApp. Those items are traditionally referred to as server-based computing or SBC. And SBC can be used to deliver an individual application or an entire desktop. It can be hosted, it can be streamed. There are various factors that can be used. The key thing to understand is that you have multiple options within any form of VDI delivery. So determining between a more traditional server-based desktop as well as a Windows virtual DOS desktop is based upon various factors. The main factors that I found are application compatibility, performance, and management. Of course, you also want to consider scalability, storage, overall cost. Some other factors for considering in your design are reliability, recoverability, flexibility, the ease of use, and the security of the solution. In the end, your decision should be server-centric or service-centric, not technology-centric. Any technology solution should be there to support the business, not for the business to support the individual technology. So in analyzing if VDI is right for you, consider all the various aspects, including SBC, and see what roles that fulfills, as in some instances that can be the entire solution. But let me reiterate something. This should be service-centric. Let the business determine the technology. Don't let the business support the technology. You don't want to let the cart grab the horse. So the key to preparing for VDI is understanding your environment. This includes user data, user personalization, application management, image management, and device management. All those aspects are impacted by the project, and depending upon your requirements, may drive to a particular technological solution. So user data includes localized documents, custom application settings. Corporate data must be identified and managed, of course. And this can be achieved through various methods, including photo redirection, home drives, profile management. However, just beyond corporate data, you may also be dealing with personal files, pictures, videos, music, and so forth. How you handle that is a decision factor that must be considered. In a VDI environment, to gain maximum mobility and flexibility, user data should be managed as its own layer. Understanding and planning where the data is stored, how it's accessed, what is allowed, not allowed, has an impact on the total performance. It is a critical undertaking to understand that. User personalization settings, commonly called profiles, include components such as application settings and some non-critical items such as favorites and desktop backgrounds. Although the non-critical elements may seem mundane to most IT departments, end user satisfaction and acceptance often hinges on these items. With local desktops, users commonly have administrative rights, but in a hosted desktop, whether it's shared or whether it's dedicated, these rights will most likely be restricted in some fashion. Aside from user acceptance, profile management or a lack of profile management can greatly impede performance metrics used with log-on times, log-off times, roaming capabilities, and so forth. Organizations will differ on how much personalization is allowed, anywhere from nothing to virtually everything. Regardless, it is important to identify what you will allow and then to optimize its management. Application management involves understanding not just which applications are in use, but understanding how they are used, which other applications they interact with, data requirements, and resource utilization. All of these items feed into what is known as the application workload. Measuring and understanding application workloads is important for ensuring that you size and scale your solution properly. Underpowered systems will become sluggish and hamper implementation, while overpowered solutions may unnecessarily consume resources, driving up project costs. Within application management, you have various delivery methods: localized applications, streamed applications, and hosted applications. Application delivery identifies how those workloads are delivered. Is the application compatible with your chosen operating system? Can the applications interact with other applications, or should they be isolated? Can they be successfully streamed, or should they be installed? Should multiple applications be bundled together as part of a larger package for delivery? Also, can the application work in an offline state, or does it require real-time access to data? For example, Word and Excel can easily work offline, but SQL interactive apps would require online data access. So there's a little reference chart for various types of considerations, such as where it's installed, where the execution takes place. So local and streamed apps execute within the virtual machine itself, but hosted apps execute on a remote application server. So you can design your virtual machines based upon the total application footprint. Image management covers critical areas of virtual machine management. This is not the hypervisor platform, although that does play a role, but more importantly, how you maintain the operating system image itself. Do you want to use persistent images that are user managed? Or do you want to use non-persistent images that are locked down and pulled from multiple users? We use a thin provisioning methodology or a thick provisioning methodology. Do you want to back up the virtual machine images themselves or just user data? How do you want to handle routine updates such as antivirus and security patches? What about major system upgrades or application updates? How will you manage those? All of those are key decision points within image management. And there are numerous tools out there for image management, whether it's layering, whether it's image replacement, whether it's linked images. But the question is to understand which of those aspects are you managing and how will you address those. And the technologies that you're considering, how do those address those issues as well. And of course, device management plays a key role. Sometimes devices are an afterthought of VDI. I want the virtual desktop, I want it in the data center, I want everything centrally located, without regards to how the users are connecting or where they're connecting from. Are you using a tablet solution such as iPads? Are you using smartphone devices such as Android or iPhone? What about thin clients, repurposed PCs, multiple monitors, laptops, kiosks, home computers, employee-owned assets? Will the devices be controlled by you? Will they be patched and depreciated over time? Will they be owned by the employees? Or are these for contractors, outside resources? Determining which types of devices are used may aid in selecting the delivery technology. For example, if you need to deliver to a smartphone, make sure the system that you're delivering can be delivered to a smartphone if that is one of your requirements. And along with that, we need to roll all this together into what we call use cases. All this data we've collected is useless until it's turned into useful information. So we talked about the different data that we collect for VDI readiness. Data management, personalization management, device management, all those items that we're going to be working with. Once you have all that data, we recommend defining it into a business use case. Now, a business use case will vary in scope and detail for each organization. But in its simplest form, a use case is a logical collection of users and applications. Each case has its own usage and delivery requirements, and they may vary from case to case. You may have knowledge workers, task workers. If you're in a hospital, you may have a difference of delivery based upon department. Other organizations may have differences between sales and manufacturing, marketing, and IT. Commonly used cases are defined by along departmental lines or user group types. The idea of a use case is to combine which applications those users need, which devices those users need to use, and that can help drive your technology solution. It also aids in prioritizing the VDI delivery. So when doing a rollout in a hospital, you may choose that the first use case is going to be the pediatric ward. And so the focus becomes which applications are needed in the ped unit. Will it be the nurses? Will it be the doctors? Will it be all of the above? Are they using tablets? Are they using thin clients? Are they using mobile carts? And you can define that business case and focus for delivery for that case. And then you take the lessons learned from that and you're able to deliver it to the next unit, and then to the next unit, and you build on top of that. But it allows to give delivery early on. And that's one of the key benefits of having clearly defined use cases. Once all the preparation and planning phases are complete, you can start designing the infrastructure to deliver your solution. This includes analyzing your current capabilities, determine if you can grow your current infrastructure, or if you need to create a net new design. Many organizations choose a net new for budgetary and capitalization purposes, as well as technological reasons. So it's isolated, you're not inheriting anything from a previous design, you're starting from scratch, it's a clean build. That is not a requirement, but it is a choice that I see many organizations making. Either existing or new infrastructure designs must include storage, network architecture, remote access, and server solutions. Infrastructure planning should also have considerations for backup and recovery, disaster planning, and business continuance. So let's look at what we call the VDI stack. And this is as far as planning our virtual machine components. Within the VM, we have our operating system, Windows 7, Windows XP, Service Pack 3. I see a lot of organizations combining VDI and Windows 7 together as a way to deploy an entirely new look and feel. Obviously, if this is a virtual machine, you want your hypervisor tools, Whether you're using Hyper-V, Zen Server, vSphere, you have your tool set that optimize the performance. And you have various items that are unique to the VDI environment as well. If you're using Vue, you have the agent for that. Zen Desktop has its own agent, and so forth. That helps deliver that virtual machine. It helps deliver that virtual desktop. You may have locally installed applications. These are generally your core enterprise apps, such as in Microsoft Office. User personalization settings. User data, which should always be separate from the profile for management. Then you may have virtual applications on top of that. These would be hosted or streamed via various technologies. So as you can see, there are many layers in this stack, and each of those layers needs to be planned for and independently managed for maximum flexibility. As far as the base infrastructure, the underlying support components, we have storage considerations. There are numerous storage types. Local disk is one that I feel is personally overlooked a lot. You also have direct attached storage. You need to determine whether you're using a SAN or a NAS device. If you are using shared storage, what is your infrastructure? Are you using iSCSI, NFS, fiber channel over Ethernet, classic fiber channel? And what sort of drives are on your back end? SAS, SATA, solid state. All of these factors build into your total storage architecture. And in most instances, it's going to be a combination. You may use local disk for some storage and shared storage for other types. You may have a combination of SAS and SSD for a hybrid storage approach. In a virtual desktop environment, there are three main concerns to consider when planning your storage. One, of course, is capacity. How much space is needed? Another is IOPS. How much throughput is needed? Windows XP and Windows 7 have a significant higher IOPS requirement than a traditional server does, and that's the way Windows is architected. You also have to plan for storms, boot storms, logon storms, which are peak utilization periods. Now, there are many storage technologies and many providers out there that offer items such as advanced caching and deduplication, which may help offset some of the storage demands. But these are some of the considerations you have when designing or analyzing your current storage. To put it in perspective, assume you have a 20 gigabyte desktop image, which really is rather conservative if you consider a laptop now comes with 250 gig as a starting image. But for a virtual image, you want to try to keep that as small as possible. And so you have any sort of integrated data, installed applications in the base OS, or part of that image. 20 gig is really not that big. But if you're considering a 10,000 user deployment, you have to consider data duplication. If you don't have items like deduplication or single image management, you run the risk of having 10,000 copies of that same 20 gigabyte data. So now you've gone from 20 gig to 200 terabytes. So that's where storage and image management come into play in reducing that total footprint. As far as network architecture, you want to understand what your current capabilities are. Are you using gigabit? Are you using 10 gig? What is your switching design? Do you have any special VLAN or custom routing requirements? Any special security isolations? Depending on the size of your environment, everything might be a single flat network, where others may have very complex VLAN environments. Your network architecture should consider things like DHCP, network boot options such as PXE, IP address schemes, any sort of protocol filtering or firewalls, and traffic segmentation. When I'm designing VDI architectures, I recommend a minimum of 3 different network fabrics: a management fabric, a virtual machine network fabric, and a storage fabric. This helps segment the traffic into necessary layers, and of course maybe segment it further as need be. Remote access should be considered to deliver your virtual desktops to off-site locations. This includes home-based and offshore workforces. Of course, not offering remote access is a valid solution. If your project is for internal users only, even they may need access from off-site. To truly unleash the power of VDI, off-site access should not only be enabled, but it should be encouraged. That way your users can come in through a laptop, a tablet, a smartphone, through the cloud, and of course into your internal private network. Some solution vendors offer integrated products such as Citrix's NetScaler. Other customers leverage VPN-type access. Some may have existing remote gateways that they can leverage as well. But you would obviously consider network security, network isolation, necessary communication ports. You may even want to have configuration standards and endpoint protection along the lines of antivirus, minimum service pack levels, and so forth. There is no right or wrong answer, but these are the things that you should consider in your design. And of course, all of this still runs on physical hardware at some point in time. Server solutions incorporate more than just the physical server. You want to take into account total processing power, memory allocation, not just quantity, but also density and speed. How much memory is in the host system, how much memory can be in the host system, and how well is that memory shared. The three main hypervisor solutions right now, XenServer, Hyper-V, and vSphere, support most of the main vendor servers. However, you always want to check your various vendors, both from a hardware perspective and a virtualization perspective, to make sure that there is compatibility. When you are scoping a server solution, you'll want to know if you're using local or shared storage or both. Local storage may require more internal drives, possibly a larger chassis, or shared storage may require additional connectivity for storage, whether you're using an HBA card, shared NICs, and so forth. And the number of network ports may depend upon the complexity of your network and the required throughput. You're using multiple 10 gig connections, multiple 1 gig connections, or a mix. Memory tends to be the most common choke point for solutions. Even with memory over allocation in the hypervisor solutions, you'll still want to determine how much RAM will be needed for your workload. If you buy too much memory up front, you've overspent without getting a gain. But if you don't buy enough memory, you soon realize the limitations of your architecture. So capacity planning is critical even in the early stages. So we saw the VDI stack in relation to the virtual machine. So let's look at it on the infrastructure layer. Obviously, we start with a physical host. We have our networking infrastructure. And here we represent multiple different NICs, one for a management fabric, one for a virtual network fabric. And we also have dedicated fabric for storage. And on top of all of this, we have our hypervisor platform, XenServer, Hyper-V, vSphere. To put it together, we have that same underlying infrastructure, and that's shared across the entire platform, multiple host servers, multiple network interfaces. Obviously, everyone's using that shared fabric. And our VM stack goes on top of there. And of course, to really gain the benefit, we have multiple VMs that run on those platforms. So we have two separate design fabrics, a virtual machine design and an infrastructure design, and those two correlate together. Although they operate in some ways separate, the design should include both aspects. So what's next? Assume you've looked at all these aspects and have decided, yes, I'm ready for VDI, or this is what we want to do. There are multiple aspects to an actual deployment phase. The biggest is the analysis phase, and that's what we've been talking about this morning. Once you've analyzed all of your requirements, then you can go about a design phase. And this is somewhat cyclical. You may analyze, design, reanalyze, redesign. The more analysis and design you do up front, the smoother implementation you will have. Once you have come onto an agreement of your design, you can begin the build phase. And of course, the build is somewhat modular. You don't have to build the entire architecture at once. You can build it in small pieces and validate as you go. So you'll test and validate, and obviously during the test and validate process, that may change some of your build specs, that may change some of your design, and any change in design and build should obviously be reanalyzed for total impact. So it is a repetitive process, but it's highly necessary. Once you have validated your design and done all of your internal testing, then you can move into a limited scope pilot or user acceptance testing to make sure the full functionality is there. And then post-pilot, you can move into a larger scale production. I highly recommend using limited use cases as both your pilot and production to start, to walk before you run, to make sure you have full success, scalability, and user acceptance testing. If you determine you are not ready for VDI yet, hopefully we've given you the tools to analyze or the items to understand as you begin that analysis phase. But the most work is in that analysis and design, and that's critical to successful VDI implementation. So at this time, we'd like to open up the floor to any questions that you may have.
Our first question is, in an enterprise environment of over 5,000 users, is there a common position which is a combination of different VDI architectures? And what is your view on moving to one specific one? Or does an enterprise keep the multiples?
Yeah, obviously it's a somewhat weighted question. The answer is almost always it depends if you've worked with consultants before. In any form of large environment, I still generally see a hybrid approach. Most of the large companies I've used, 5,000, 10,000, as much as 40,000 users, look at segmenting some of the different applications. Well, they will use a combination of VDI architecture to deliver the desktop itself with some integrated applications, but then also have an SBC backend for either hosting or streaming additional applications. By removing a lot of the applications from the base image, it allows more layering and more segmentation. It's a little bit more management that gives them more flexibility for trying to create that common user image for their image management.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is your view on VDI contributing to the desktop as a cloud? For example, if the desktop is virtualized, then why have anything except terminals? And what then is application impact?
Well, that's a very good question. And that's one of the things that I was talking about with a colleague the other day, that we've gone from a kind of a dummy terminal, mainframe-centric computing environment to a distributed environment, coming almost back to that centralized environment again. And that really depends upon what your needs are on that terminal side. I've had quite a few customers that are using thin clients more or less as you would an old-style dummy terminal. All they're doing is delivering the keyboard, video, mouse, and audio if necessary. But there's no processing done on that endpoint. Obviously, in that case, it has to be fully connected all the time. You may also offload some processing to the endpoint, so it may be a mix of delivery solutions. And that's really going to come back to that business case and user case analysis of what do you need to do and where do you need to do it at. So VDI is not for everyone, and I don't anticipate it being for everyone. I see it for task workers, repetitive workloads, for your road warriors and some of your higher-end users that need greater access. It's still more cost-effective to deliver a high-powered laptop than to try to design VDI for high-powered users at this point in time. As the product sets mature, as the technology matures, as the back-end servers become less expensive, that may change, but there's still a need for a hybrid approach. I don't see a true dumb terminal type scenario right now. There are use cases for that, and that's where your lower-end thin clients really come into play. But I wouldn't say that's effective for every scenario.
How would you handle remote connectivity for home-based users and roaming users?
The remote connectivity, obviously, there are some things in there that you cannot control, the general internet cloud. So there are some limitations on what you can do. Obviously, if you're in a major metropolitan or urban area where you have, it's common to have high-speed internet to residences for home users, where you have a lot of areas with Wi-Fi access that have a strong signal, there's not a lot of concerns beyond the security of the connection. You definitely want secure connections no matter how they're coming in from the outside world, both with endpoint security, minimum requirement scans, possibly two-factor authentication. All of your security factors are the same whether you're using VDI or any other type of remote access. Now, if you have some lower link, possibly overseas, then you get into concerns of speed and performance, where there are various types of WAN accelerators that can assist. They don't eliminate all the latency, but they can assist with the latency. You can even look at that for specialized users or have fallback options such as cellular data plans for laptops. Part of that solution is really going to depend upon the individual needs of those remote users. How much bandwidth do they require? What exactly are they trying to achieve? But right now, that's one of the big pushes for a lot of VDI is, BYOC, bring your own computer, employee-owned assets, whatever term you may want to use for that. Connecting through the general internet cloud is one of the biggest selling points and big push points right now for VDI. And it's very successful. It's just understanding your user workforce and exactly what their connectivity needs are. And then any issues that you have with connectivity, there are ways to help counteract those.
And this is the last question that we have time for. Is there a quote-unquote easy way to assess the use case groups for design of the varying desktops?
Again, that's going to depend upon scale. There are a couple different ways out there. You can do it. One, obviously, is just knowing your applications and who uses them. So if you have prescribed application owners, I always start there. Some other organizations will use surveys, make a list of the common, 50 or 100 applications that they know they maintain, and ask users which ones they use. There are also some data collection tools out there from various vendors that you can run on the endpoints. You can even use like SCCM to run scans to see what applications perform an application inventory. And there's various tools out there to determine which applications are used, when they're used, how frequently, what their workloads are. Part of that depends on how automated you want that data collection to be. But at some point in time, there's still the user interaction of sitting down and determining these 10 or these 20 applications comprise or what our sales folks need. These 15 applications are what marketing needs. And sometimes it's a moving line. Something may not be identified up front, may be added later. Some things may be identified but determined or not necessary for a go forward in the VDI environment. There's definitely more art than science in determining those use cases. The key is to try to get to the common elements that are needed by the largest group of people. I generally refer to that as an 80-20 rule. You want to, if you can deliver for 80% of the workforce or give users 80% of what they need, that is generally going to be deemed a success. But there's always going to be some exceptions that either can't be delivered, won't be delivered, or are chosen to be avoided.
Great. That's all the time we have for questions at this time. All unanswered questions I will send over to Andy to follow up with you directly. Thank you, Andy. And thank you so much for joining us for today's webcast. As mentioned at the beginning of the call, we'll be emailing you the presentation you saw today. Should you have any additional questions, send them to me and I will ensure Andy follows up. Join us next month when Glasshouse will be discussing which cloud should be in my 10-day forecast. Have a great rest of your day.